Nerd Night, the film catalog, a history of felines in Meowvies.
All right, so do we have any cat people in the crowd? All right, excellent, my people. Do we have any dog people in the crowd? Okay, well, I apologize, dog people. This is all about cats. I'm going to diss on dogs as little as possible. There's a tiny, tiny little bit, but mostly this is just a celebration of cats. I promise that there's not going to be any images of cats being injured or killed from movies. I cannot say the same thing about humans, and I cannot say the same thing about the human language. This presentation is full of terrible puns. So let's go. So what I'm going to argue tonight is that cats are approximately 63.86% responsible for the invention of cinema. And I'm going to argue for why that is true. So the main reason is simply eleurophilia, which is the Greek for the love of cats, right? So there's just this impulse to capture cats on film that drives cinema forward. And we know that the internet is made of cats, right? We've gotten to this point. So it has its origins in the very first inventions of the photographic medium. So we're going to start with a guy named Edward Muybridge in 1878. And so that you know my insanity is intact, I recognize this is not a cat. This is a horse. We'll get to cats in a second, but it all starts, and actually I think this is something that's really fascinating about the origin of cinema, is that it began with a fascination with animals. So Edward Muybridge was part of a bet, and it was a bet that was part of a long-standing debate for decades about whether when a horse runs or gallops, it lifts all four hooves off the ground. And that's not something that you can see or verify with the naked eye. It happens so fast, it's very difficult to see without some kind of use of technology. So to win this bet, Muybridge invented a system where he set up a set of cameras along a track, and each camera had a trip device, like a wire trip. And as the horse ran in front of the cameras, it tripped those wires, and every camera caught a still image of the horse over the course of its run. So this is an animation of all of the still images that he captured that prove what? So does the horse lift all four hooves off the ground? Yes, so we can verify that photographically from this evidence. So he realized that now if he put all of these images together, he has a record of the motion of the horse, and if he plays those images rapidly one after another, we get motion, right? We get the illusion of motion captured on film. So he invented a device called the zoopraxinoscope, and this is actually from an exhibit at the DIA. And the way the zoopraxinoscope worked is he had a glass disc, and on the edges of the glass disc, he put these little images of the horse in motion, and then ran them through this device that has a disc that kind of spins, and would capture just or project one of those images at a time. And so when we see those in rapid succession, it produces this illusion of motion, right? All film is ultimately animation. It's just a collection of still images that when we see them in rapid succession produces the illusion of motion. So this was the origin of cinema, right? One of the very first inventions that turned photographic images into motion. But Edward Muybridge was no dummy, so he also did this with a cat. So this is really the very first cat video, right here. And I think what's impressive, it's amazing that he invented cinema, but his real legacy is actually getting a cat to do this in front of a camera. And so that's the real mystery of Edward Muybridge. Now, some of you may be familiar with this, but the first real cat film, a cat that was actually captured on film and projected through something like a projector, was The Boxing Cats, Professor Welton's, from 1894, and this was produced as part of Thomas Edison's Black Maria studio, Thomas Edison being one of the inventors that was the forefathers of cinema. What we see here is a couple cats. They're described as being trained. Really, I think they were antagonized to kind of throw some punches at each other with their little boxing gloves on. And it's kind of hard to see in this GIF, but we have Professor Welton in the background, and he's actually holding up their harnesses. So they kind of fall to the ground like, oh, I don't want to do this. And he holds the harnesses up, and then they just kind of like, disinterestedly kind of punch at each other a little bit. So this was a film that was actually shown on a kinetoscope. And these were, again, early kind of proto-cinema devices. If you've been to Marvin's Marvelous Mechanical Museum, he has some of these. They're kind of boxes that have a loop of film inside. And you put in your quarter, and you can wind it, or it plays automatically. You look in like a little peephole, and you see the film inside the peephole. So this was like a little novelty film. This film was a big hit. It was among a bunch of other kinds of novelty films like cockfights and dogfights that people enjoyed watching at the time. It was actually such a big hit that people were kind of like, do we really need to go forward with this? Like, I think this is cinema. We've achieved it here. But luckily, we had some additional inventors that were like, no, we need more cats. So the Lumiere brothers, who were other forefathers of cinema in France, also developed some technology for capturing film, producing cinema. And they would produce these little 1-minute, kind of one-reeler, nonfiction, just slice-of-life films that became known as Lumieres. So things that were just like workers leaving the factory or the train leaving the station. And in this case, La Petite Fille et son Chat, just the little girl and her cat, which was probably staged, but is still meant to look like something that's just a little bit of a slice of life. And then we get a breakthrough. So this is a milestone film. This is The Sick Kitten from 1903. This is also a little bit more of a fiction film, so it's something that's kind of staged. It's two little kids that are playing doctors and trying to nurse their little sick kitten. The thing that was amazing about this film that we don't see in this GIF is that this was the first time that we saw a cut from a wide shot to a close-up. Because of course, if there's a cat on film, we want to get closer, right? We want to be up in the fur. So this was the first film where we had like a wide shot where we saw the little girl and her cat and then made a cut to the close-up. And in early cinema, there was kind of a question about whether audiences would understand like what's happening here? What's happening when suddenly like we see this big image and then we see this close-up image. And so it was one of the first times that we really understood how editing could work in cinema. The Sick Kitten. Now, another milestone in the history of cats in film is that the first color animated film was a cat film. This is not the original. The original is a lost film, but this is a film that's called The Debut of Thomas Cat. This film no longer exists. It didn't really do very well, despite the fact that it has a cat in it. It was made in 1920 by Earl Hurd for Bray Studios. And this was, again, the very first color animated film. It was actually shot with a camera that was made to shoot color, just 2 colors. It was incredibly expensive, and again, the film didn't do very well, so they didn't go much further with color cinema. But what's cool about this is that John Bray, whose studio this was, is from Michigan. So he was born in Detroit. He studied at Alma College. He created this studio that is now a key part of the history of cat films, right here from Michigan. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and really start thinking about the role of cat characters, the role of cats in driving narratives forward in the history of cinema. And The Wizard of Oz becomes one of the important films for thinking about this. And so I want to address a couple myths. One of the myths is that a lot of people think this was the first color film. It was not. So there were several other Technicolor films that were made before The Wizard of Oz, some films that were hand-colored using inks and tints by hand. But for whatever reason, the Wizard of Oz, maybe because it was right at the end of the Depression, it was like the first real color film a lot of people had seen, is often recognized as being the first color film. But it's also a film where we think of one of the heroes as being Toto, right? The dog, right? If we think about an animal in this film, we think about Toto. But I want to make an argument that it's actually a cat that is the most important part of this film. So, sorry, Toto. It's a yellow X. I tried to be gentle. It's actually this moment with this little Siamese cat that is being held by one of the residents of the Emerald City. Because what's happening here is Dorothy is in the balloon. She's about to float off with the wizard and be returned to Kansas, when Toto sees this little Siamese going like, "You want a piece of this?" And Toto is like, "Yes, I do." And he jumps out of the basket, causes Dorothy to jump out of the balloon. The balloon floats away without her. And that's what causes her to have to realize that there's no place like home, right? That she just has to believe in herself in order to get back to Kansas. So it's all about this cat that is the major turning point in this film. And so this is going to bring me to another really important part of the role of cats in film history, which is the feline gaze. And so to talk about the feline gaze, I need to take a little detour into film theory here for a second. The gaze, this notion of the gaze and who the camera is representing when we watch a movie, whose point of view the camera represents when we're watching a film, is an important part of film theory. And we often think of the gaze as being a male gaze in film history, as we can see with these images of various cat women, Halle Berry and Michelle Pfeiffer. That typically in mainstream Hollywood films, women are presented as there for the pleasure of the male viewer, often in very sexualized outfits. They're there as the spectacle. They don't really drive the story forward. They're the ones that need to be rescued, or they're the ones that are a sex object. They're not the ones that are making things happen. They don't have agency. So what film theory kind of says about the gaze is that whoever has the gaze, whoever is doing the looking in a film, is the one that has power. So women tend to be sort of, the helpless kinds of characters. The male characters that are looking at the women tend to be the ones that can be active and really drive the story forward. And so this is where I want to start thinking about feline agency and the power of the feline look. And so this takes me to Alien. Jonesy! One of my very favorite cats. So Alien, 1979, directed by Ridley Scott. Jonesy. So Jones, the thing that's really fascinating about Jones, and this is true of a lot of cats when you really start looking at their representations in film, is that Jones is pretty much present for every single killing that happens in Alien. So Jones sees everything and is aware of more of what's happening in the story than any of the other characters are. He's kind of a stand-in for the filmmaker, right? Jones is doing the looking. And the thing that I love about Jones, too, is that cats are kind of a great subject for what's known as the Kuleshov effect. And the Kuleshov effect is an experiment in film editing that suggests that if we see two images put next to each other, we're going to ascribe some kind of a relationship between those two images. So Kuleshov was an early Soviet filmmaker, and he would show audiences an image of a man, just with a kind of a blank expression on his face, followed by another image. And depending on what that other image was, audiences would interpret his expression in different ways. So if they saw the image of the man and saw a bowl of soup, they would believe he was hungry. If they saw the man and then they saw a coffin, they would believe that he was sad. Jonesy here, and cats in general, could be looking at anything. We could imagine that Jonesy is looking at a really uninteresting cat toy in this shot. We could imagine that Jonesy is, being called home and is deciding that he's just going to do his own thing. Instead, Jonesy is watching an alien mutilate a man in this shot. But that little expression on his face could mean anything. So cats have this really wonderful, mysterious kind of face that we can ascribe lots of different meanings to. But again, Jonesy is the one doing the looking, and Jonesy is one of the two that survive at the end of this film, spoiler alert. So Jonesy has this really important role in this film. And there's some other films that really engage this idea of the feline gaze, really showing us images of what we might imagine the feline experience to be. And this is a really wonderful film. It's called The Private Life of a Cat by Alexander Hammond and Maya Deren, Maya Deren was one of the godmothers of experimental film in the United States. This is online. I highly recommend it. It's about 20 minutes. And this is a film in which the filmmaker follows a little cat couple in his house, they're his pets, around with a camera as the mom cat gives birth and the dad cat tends to her. But it's all pretty much shot from the cat's point of view. So this is the mom cat in labor. Yes, right, yes. So she's a little busy right now. And we see these other images. So mom cat with her kittens and dad cat who's checking in, making sure everything's okay. We're seeing life from the kitten's point of view over here. So again, like a film that's really driven by the kitties. So I'm going to jump a little bit now to this film, to this book called Cats on Film by Ann Bilson, because I'm sure it's shocking to you that somebody else is doing this kind of research. This is kind of a fun little book, but it's kind of an encyclopedia of different kinds of cat characters, or our kitty types. And so she has a bunch of them: the cat-tagonist, the hero puss, the Catpanion, Catzilla, Puszilla, Cat Shock, a whole bunch of them. I'm not crazy about the titles that she gives to these different characters, because if you're gonna go for a pun, go for the pun. So I'm gonna go through just a couple of these and kind of demonstrate how they play out in film history, but I've given some of them my own name. So the Cat-tagonist, or the Mune character. I know that one kind of pushing that one a little bit. These are movies that star cats, right? Where the cat is just the main character, it's driving it forward. A couple of Disney movies, The 3 Lives of Thomasina, which is about a cat that has 3 lives instead of 9 lives. The Cat from Outer Space from 1978, also a Disney film. Yes, fans of The Cat from Outer Space. One of the rare kind of Disney cat movies, live action movies. The Catzilla, or Feline. And these are bad cats, right? So these are the cats that are the evil monsters in a film that wreak havoc. So Pet Sematary, where a cat gets buried and then kind of resurrected, and it's never quite the same. Tales from the Dark Side. Stephen King has a ton of very bad cats in his films. I don't know if you can exactly see what's going on here. This is a brilliant clip of a cat crawling out of a guy's head, as they do. This is called The Cat from Hell, Tales from the Dark Side. More Felines. So this is Let the Right One In, the Swedish film. This is a part when multiple cats attack a woman. And part of what I like about this is that this is a moment when cats realize something is not right with a human being, and they are going to take that human being out. But this is also an image I love, if you can see it, because we have what I call an uncanny cat, which is these animatronic cats that don't quite look right. And so this sent me down a little bit of a rabbit hole, or perhaps I should say a cat hole, in animatronic cats that are made for film. So there's a whole industry of animatronic and realistic puppets made of animals for various movies. They're, again, very uncanny, very disturbing looking. I'm not sure why we need this one. I've seen hairballs that look more realistic as a cat than these guys do. But there's a whole, there's websites. You can search, any kind of cat you need, whatever you need it doing. You just need paws. You can just get paws. So anyway, you can go down that hole on your own. But again, some uncanny cats here. So Scary Movie 2. Again, the cat just not quite right, like Hocus Pocus kind of level cat. The Scared Scout's Guide to the Zombie Apocalypse, also just anyway, so that's a whole other category of cat that I just, I'm interested in these uncanny cats. And then we have Puszilla, and Puszilla is the villain's little pet cat that he keeps as a companion, or as I like to call it, Felinkenstein's monsters. Oh, come on, Felinkenstein. So this is going to be like James Bond, You Only Live Twice, The Godfather, and part of what I love about The Godfather is this cat is just having a great time in Marlon Brando's lap. It's a really beautiful moment where the cat is not having to be trained, maybe it's sedated, but is really acting in a very lovely, loving way for Marlon Brando. And of course, Austin Powers, again, riffing on some of these other cats. And again, I think that some of Ann Bilson's categories they don't quite satisfy the kinds of characters that we see from cats, because these are obviously comic cats. And she doesn't really get into comedy cats, right? So I've kind of, I don't have room in this presentation, to include, say, Jinx from Meet the Parents, which is a comic kind of cat. We have the cat panion, or as I like to say, the count per part. And that's going to be a classic cat in a movie like Breakfast at Tiffany's, where if you have cats, it's probably familiar to you, the whole, I'm going to jump on your head at 5:15 in the morning to wake you up. Perhaps less familiar is the cat inside your first smooch with your lover in the rain, as we see here. But the companion cat, the friendly cat that's kind of there in the background. Also, we see this in the movie with Art Carney, Harry and Tonto from 1974, and then kind of see that echoed in Inside Llewyn Davis, the Coen Brothers movie starring the fox, Oscar Isaac. Oh, come on, guys. Oscar Isaac? He's such a fox. Okay. So, has anybody seen Inside Llewyn Davis? Oh, my goodness. So this is my second favorite cat after Jonesy. Where Llewyn Davis is kind of this down-and-out singer-songwriter who ends up with this cat that he's cat-sitting that he just has to kind of carry around with him all over the city. And so we see this moment where he's taking the cat on the subway, and again, we get this brief moment where we switch to the cat's point of view and just see what the cat is seeing looking out the subway. So it's this beautiful moment where the film, again, becomes about the cat for just that moment. The cat is making the film. So that's this kind of feline agency that I'm really interested in. How does the cat make the story happen? How is the cat the important part of the narrative? And the other part, the other element of cats in movies that I'm interested in that Ann Bilson doesn't really go into is cats that have this kind of sixth sense, right? They can detect that something's not right. There's a ghost in the room. There's a vampire in the room. There's a werewolf in the room. So we see that in something like Ghost, where Patrick Swayze, again, spoiler alert, he's a ghost at this point, and the cat is kind of not having it. An American Werewolf in London, the cat realizes that our guy is kind of starting to take on wolfen characteristics and reacts to it. So cats that have this kind of psychic ability. Dracula, again, the cat is recognizing that this is not a normal human being. There's something kind of evil here, or even a little bit of the Shape of Water, where the cat is reacting to the amphibian. But these are moments where, again, the cat sees something that nobody else can see. And that's an important part of cinema, right? It's all about seeing and what seeing does for the rest of the story. The other thing I love about cats as actors is they don't take direction very well. So a lot of these sequences have to involve some really clever editing. So you maybe get a couple shots of the cat and what you want the cat to be doing, but the cat's not quite looking in the right direction. And you just have to figure out a way that you're going to cut that together with somebody else, with Patrick Swayze, and make it all look like it kind of belongs together. So some further reading. Again, if you really want to dive into this website, Cinema Cats, is amazing. It is an encyclopedic catalog of cats in film with multiple images. Even if you can't really make out that there's a cat in the image, there's arrows that will point you to the cat. And it has hundreds of movies. There's even going to be a section that's coming soon on cat actors. So the actors that played the characters, the feline actors that played the characters that we love. So Cinema Cats is amazing. Also, if you have more of an academic bent, then Animal Life in the Moving Image is also a really wonderful book. There's a fantastic chapter in there about cats in film. Well, I'll just end with a couple little things here going back to the presentation. And one is a quote by a wonderful filmmaker named Chris Marker, who made the films Sans Soleil and La Jetée, if you know those films. But he said, he made a wonderful film about cats, and he said, a cat is never on the side of power. Meaning that cats are just anti-authoritarian, right? They're resistors, they're political. And that's something that I really love about cats. There's more to them, I think, than they often are given credit for in films. And then again, thinking about this idea of cats looking, cat as spectator, cat enjoying watching movies. You're probably familiar with on Netflix, you can get movies that are just like birds and fish that cats actually enjoy watching. But there are also moviegoers. So these are two of my cats, the late great Mr. Peterson, who loved The Martian, starring Matt Damon. And the newest member of the family, Newt, whose favorite film is Jackass the movie. And this is the scene where Ryan Dunn puts a toy car in a condom and sticks it in his butt and goes for an x-ray. That's her favorite part. It's my favorite part too. So we get along really well. Thank you.
This program was recorded on July 19th, 2018 at Live, 102 South 1st Street, Ann Arbor, Michigan.